Hi again then guys, and welcome to another special Project Replica style build. And this particular build, although not obscure, isn't necessarily a build which would come to mind first. But we have run through a lot of replicas in this series, and some of them, by the nature of the series, will be less thought of. Not necessarily obscure, as I said, it's certainly not a rare vehicle, but just not a car which many people would probably request to have done. The reason why I like to keep it varied, though, is to open people's minds to new cars which they may not have thought about. In some cases, cars which really do deserve to be on Gran Turismo, especially I would say in the case of this one today. Now, the car which we're replicating is basically the top-of-the-line version, in its time, of the BMW hot hatch lineup. I was never really a fan of the 1 Series until they made the 130i M Sport. Because what that car offers is the trademark rear-wheel drive driver's car style of vehicle, where it's all about the passion and the driving and the enjoyment of driving in a class of vehicle which typically is more about front-wheel drive handling. So it gives it a totally unique perspective within that category. And the 130i M Sport is basically the top of the tree for the 1 Series. Now, of course, it's been surpassed now with the 1M, all that kind of thing, but those aren't hatches anymore. This was the BMW hot hatch. Now, visually, we can't make it look that similar. The car does have a different body kit in real life, but we've got a similar colour to the colour which you'd commonly see that car in, and the rims are fairly similar. Now, speaking of the colour and the rims, I've changed the colour to one of those special Japanese colours. It's actually blue number 6C. And I can't recall how I got that colour, but I think it was probably from a seasonal event. So unfortunately you can't really get that from buying a car. There are, however, plenty of other blues on the game. You could try, for instance, Arden Blue, which I believe comes from Jaguar. If I remember correctly, that's a similar kind of blue. So if you want that kind of colour, you can get it. Now, as far as the rims, I've gone for NKSC05s in the inch up 1. And that's it for the visuals. Being a production car, you can change the colour, of course, if you want to. You could go for different rims if you don't think those are close enough, etc, etc. But for now, we'll go over to the mechanical side of things, and then, as we always do, take it out to a circuit to see how it handles itself. Now, as far as the tuning setup on this particular car, I opted to go for realism rather than rounding off the PP, because although you can, say to 440, I figured that not that many people race at the 440 PP level. It's a little bit overly niched, so if you want to build it for that level you can. I've just opted not to, in favour of just the pure replica side of things. Now, I've gone for sports soft tyres. It's down to personal preference, of course. As far as brakes, we've left those stock, because again, it's a production car, you don't want it to feel too good. For the suspension, we've got the ride height on 140, because although the real car has a purposeful stance, it's certainly not slammed by any means. As far as springs, we've increased those to 475 and 575. The dampers and anti-roll I've actually reduced to 2, as I sometimes do with these builds, because that is still stiffer than stock. But at the same time, it's not overly stiff. You still get that little bit of body roll, a little bit of suspension travel and lift through corners, which you would want a car like this to have to feel accurate. As far as camber and toe, we've got those neutral. Feel free to fit them if you want to, but any of you guys who have been around on the channel for a while will know I'm just not into that. We'll come back to the gearbox in just a second. As far as the diff, I've gone for halfway on initial torque and as low as possible for acceleration and braking. But as usual, if you feel the need or just want to try something else, then feel free to change those numbers. As far as power, we do have an oil change, so you need to bear that in mind. Then for the tuning parts themselves, we've gone for the Stage 3 engine tune, as you can see, sports computer, exhaust, manifold, cat and intake tuning, and all we haven't done is the turbo. Then you want to reduce the power down to 93.7%. You don't actually have to do all of that. You could remove 1 or 2 of the other parts and have the limiter higher. The important thing is to get 265 horsepower, because that's what the real car's got. Now, as far as the weight, we are obviously running the actual weight of the real car, and to do that you actually need to add quite a bit of ballast, 115 kilos to be exact, and that brings us up to the actual weight of the real car. And then finally for the gearbox, and we are actually running real ratios on this one as well, the actual car's gear ratios, you will need to do a gearbox flip to be able to hit these numbers. Now I would recommend doing a flip from 3. Now if you're not familiar with what that means, what you want to do is remove and refit the gearbox so that it goes back to the default settings, then take your max speed all the way up to 261, then bring your final drive down to 3000, then come back to your auto setting, click it down and up a peg, and then you'll be able to hit these individual gears. And these are, as I said, the real ratios of the actual car: 4171, 2340, 1521, 1143, 867 and 691. And then once you've done all of those, you want to come back to the final gear, as you can see there, the final drive, and take it up to 3636. And that's it overall for the replica. Now let's, of course, take it out to a track. Now, one of the great things I would say about replicating a car like the 130iM Sport is that although the car does look different to the version which we have on the game, the 120i, it doesn't look too different for it to be off-putting. The essential shape and the essential details are similar. It's just basically the front bumper, which is the most different, and of course side skirts, rear bumper, but they're not quite as noticeable as the front end difference, which is the majority of the change in the visuals. So overall it's more of a performance-based build, and as far as performance, I'm happy with it. Being rear-wheel drive, it offers that unique style within the hot hatch class, and it's certainly a quick car. So overall, if you do decide to use this replica, I hope you find it fun first and foremost, and potentially useful for racing or seasonals if you choose to use it for that. But that's it for this particular build, and I'll see you guys next time. And for now, as always, thanks for watching.